That Sunday dinner began like hundreds of other family dinners. The long oak dining table, warm yellow lighting, and a roasted chicken placed at the center. My daughter sat across from me, forcing a polite smile. My son-in-law poured wine for everyone, his manners flawless to the point of perfection. His mother sat beside him, back straight, eyes tracking every slight movement. There was no warning of what was about to happen. It was just a tiny mistake. My daughter placed the spoon in the wrong spot, her husband's place. I still remember the faint clink of metal against the plate, very light. The first slap landed sharp and dry. The second came faster. The third, so hard that her head snapped violently to the side. No one screamed. No one stood up. Then I heard applause. Her mother-in-law. She smiled slowly with satisfaction. "That's how women learn to behave," she said, as if commenting on a dish. In that moment, the room fell into absolute silence. I did not scream. I did not rush forward. I did not hold my daughter. I stayed seated. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to look at my daughter's face. Not pain, but shame. 30 seconds to understand that if I reacted with emotion, I would lose her forever. And 30 seconds to decide, tonight, everything would come to an end. If you are listening to this story, you may also believe that family is the safest place to be. This channel exists so we can tell these hard truths together. Stay with us, listen until the end, and become part of a community that believes in respect and the protection of family. I stood up and made the phone call that changed all of our lives. My name is Margaret Hale. That year, I was 58 years old. I had been a lawyer for over 30 years, specializing in domestic violence cases. I had sat in courtrooms with men who looked me straight in the eye and said their wives deserved to be taught a lesson. I had heard hundreds of similar stories with different names and faces. I once believed I was immune to mistakes. I believed that if anyone truly understood violence, that person would never allow it to happen in their own family. I was wrong. My daughter, Emily, has always been the most incredible pride of my life. She was independent, intelligent, and strong-minded. I believed I had raised her strong enough to protect herself. I believed she would recognize danger and leave if necessary. The truth is, I trusted my logic too much and the minor warning signs too little. When Emily got married, I told myself, not all men are abusers. Not every marriage is like the cases I handle. My daughter is grown. I used my professional experience to justify my silence. There were times she looked exhausted. There were times when she spoke less. There were phone calls that ended too quickly. I noticed, but I didn't push. Part of me didn't want to interfere. Part of me was afraid that if I asked, I would hear something I didn't want to hear. I had advised many women, don't ignore your instincts. But with my own daughter, I did the opposite. That night, when the 3 slaps rang out, I didn't just see my daughter being hit. I saw every moment I had chosen silence come crashing back all at once. Those 30 seconds at the table were not because I was weak. They were because I was facing the most brutal truth of my life. I, a woman who had protected hundreds of women, had failed to protect my own daughter in time. And that failure nearly cost her her life. Before everything collapsed, Emily was not a weak person. She grew up in a typical family, not wealthy, but always orderly and respectful. Her father, David, was a quiet man who never raised his voice. In more than 30 years of marriage, I never once saw him raise a hand or use words to hurt someone. When we disagreed, we sat down and talked, sometimes tense, sometimes exhausting, but never frightening. Emily grew up in that environment. She learned that love does not require control. That family is a place of safety, not a battlefield. That elders are respected because they lead by example, not because they hold power. She was a good student, not flashy excellence, but steady and disciplined. She studied chemical engineering and worked for a major pharmaceutical company. When she got her first job, she called me just to say, "I can do this on my own now, Mom." I remember clearly the family dinners when David was still alive. He always cooked on Sundays. Emily would sit at the kitchen table discussing her new projects and what she was learning. No one interrupted her. No one told her to talk less. No one made her doubt her worth. That was Emily before marriage. Only later did I understand that violence does not begin with a slap. It begins when a person slowly stops being themselves. Emily used to laugh easily, but about a year before that fateful dinner, her laughter began to fade. Not completely, just shorter, lighter, as if she were always bracing for something. She was still successful, still working, still saying everything was fine. But she stopped sharing details. I remember asking once, "Do you still go running on the weekends?" She answered quickly, "I've been really busy lately, Mom." Another time I asked, "Do you still see your old friends?" She smiled. "We're all grown up now." Those answers sounded normal, too normal. And that's why I didn't realize what was happening. When David passed away, Emily lost her most excellent emotional anchor. She handled everything with strength, taking care of me, arranging the funeral, and managing work. I thought she was simply growing up faster due to the circumstances. I didn't know that grief had made her more vulnerable. No one teaches us that an intelligent, successful woman, loved since childhood, can still fall into abuse. Not because she is foolish, but because she was taught to trust. Emily trusted. She believed love required sacrifice. She believed that endurance was what kept a family together. She believed that if she tried just a little harder, everything would return to its former state. Her family taught her how to love correctly, but no one taught her how to recognize when love becomes distorted. And that is the most painful truth for me. Not because Emily was weak, but because she loved the right way, in the wrong relationship. Emily met Ryan at a professional conference. When she first talked about him, there was a rare note of excitement in her voice. He's smart, polite, and very engaging to talk to. The first time Ryan came to our house for dinner, I understood why my daughter was drawn to him. He arrived on time, bought a bottle of wine, shook my hand with both of his, asked about my work, and addressed me as Mrs. Hale with evident respect. He spoke softly, held steady eye contact, and smiled at the right moments, the kind of man any mother could easily approve of. During dinner, Ryan never raised his voice. He didn't brag, he didn't act superior. He complimented Emily's cooking and praised me for raising her well. However, there were some minor details that I overlooked at the time. When Emily talked about a project at work, Ryan interrupted her mid-sentence, very gently. What I mean is, Emily fell silent, letting him continue. When I asked Emily a question, Ryan answered on her behalf. Not rudely, just faster. I remember thinking, he's probably just enthusiastic. The second time we met, I paid more attention to Ryan's mother, Barbara. She talked a lot about her son, about how a good wife needs to know how to listen, about how women these days are too independent. Her tone wasn't harsh. On the contrary, it was very gentle, the kind of gentleness that makes disagreement difficult. My Ryan is demanding, but he needs a wife who knows how to be reasonable. Emily smiled. I noticed the smile was a little stiff. After that, the same patterns repeated, very subtly. Ryan always appeared caring, but he often made comments. Isn't that outfit a bit too noticeable? You're getting home late again? I'm just worried about you. Those words sounded like love. No one would call them control. Emily gradually changed her habits. She stopped running in the mornings. She saw her friends less. When I asked, she answered naturally, "We just like staying home more." Ryan was always by her side, never more than a step away. He spoke for Emily, decided for Emily, but always used the word we. We think this way. We feel the other option suits us better. I once thought that was closeness. But one evening, when Ryan stepped outside to take a phone call, I asked Emily very quietly, "Are you okay?" She answered immediately, "I'm fine, Mom." Too fast. Too neat. When Ryan came back, Emily's expression changed at once. Not fear, but caution, as if she had just done something she wasn't supposed to do. That night, I said nothing. I told myself I was being oversensitive. I couldn't apply my professional experience to my daughter's private life. That was one of my greatest mistakes. Ryan never raised his voice in front of me. He always knew when to appear perfect. He understood that the most effective control is the kind no one notices. And Barbara, his mother, always stood behind him. She never needed to give orders. She only had to repeat the old standards. Back in my day, I did this. Husband and wife need to endure each other. Men having tempers is normal. I watched Emily sit between the two of them, and for the first time, I felt that my daughter no longer had a place in her own story. But I remained silent. Because Ryan hadn't done anything clearly wrong. Because Barbara always spoke gently. Because Emily never asked for help. And because so many tragedies begin in precisely this way. David passed away on a tranquil night. He had a heart attack in his sleep. No pain, the doctors said, but his death left a void none of us had anticipated. For me, it was the loss of a life partner. For Emily, it was the loss of the man who had taught her what a healthy relationship looked like. She collapsed into my arms at the funeral, crying like a child. For the first time in many years, I saw her completely broken. Ryan was there. He behaved appropriately. Not cold, but not overly close either. He held Emily briefly, then let go. When others comforted her, he stepped back, as if it had nothing to do with him. Barbara was different. She constantly spoke about her own pain at losing her husband. I understand this feeling. I went through the same thing. Women have to be strong. Those words weren't entirely wrong, but they were repeated too often, too steadily, until Emily's pain seemed to shrink. After the funeral, Emily stayed with me for a few weeks. She cooked, cleaned, and reminded me to take my medication. She took care of me more than she took care of herself. Ryan began to show his dissatisfaction. You've been with your mother too long. Your mom needs to learn to be independent. We have our own family, too. Those statements sounded reasonable. I even nodded when Emily repeated them to me. I thought Ryan was simply concerned about their marriage. What I didn't notice was that this was the first time he clearly pulled Emily away from me. Emily returned home to Ryan, and things changed faster. She called me less. When she did, her voice was quick and low, as if she didn't want anyone to hear. The long conversations gave way to short answers. I'm fine. Work is normal. Don't worry. When I asked Ryan, he smiled. Emily's just sensitive after the shock. She'll be okay. I believed him, because I wanted to believe him. After David's death, Ryan's control increased, but remained subtle. He asked Emily where she was going, who she was seeing, and when she'd be back, not with commands, but with concern. I'm afraid you'll get tired. I just care about you. Emily began dressing differently, more modest, more muted. When I asked, she said, it's just more convenient. Barbara appeared more often. She came to their house unannounced, rearranged things, commented on Emily's cooking and cleaning. Girls today are too pampered. A wife needs to know how to endure. Ryan always sided with his mother. She just wants what's best for you. My mom has more experience. Emily gradually stopped arguing. I recall one phone call vividly. I asked, "Are you unhappy?" Emily was silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "You get used to it, Mom." That sentence sent a chill through me. David had taught her that family is where you get to be yourself, not a place where you learn to live with pain. But after he was gone, no one repeated that lesson every day. Ryan stepped into that void. He didn't create fear right away. He created dependence. And Barbara reinforced it with advice that sounded proper on the surface. I realized too late that when the elder, the moral anchor of a family, disappears, if no one replaces that role with kindness, power falls into the hands of those who know how to manipulate. David had been the boundary. When he was gone, that boundary vanished. and violence finally found its place. Emily was not hit right away. That is important to say clearly because most people think violence begins with a punch. But for my daughter, it began with very ordinary words. Ryan started criticizing more often, not loudly, not rudely. "You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. I'm just telling the truth." Whenever Emily felt hurt or reacted, Ryan would sigh, "I don't understand why you always think so negatively." Gradually, she stopped reacting. Ryan took another step forward. He began offering advice. "You should leave work earlier. That job isn't as important as family. I don't like you coming home late." Those words sounded like concern. Emily believed that too. She told me Ryan was worried about her health, that he just wanted to build a stable family. I listened and nodded. I didn't object. I didn't realize that Emily's life decisions were slowly slipping away from her control. Barbara played a prominent role during this stage. She often reminded Emily that marriage requires sacrifice. "You have to understand men. If women put up with a little, the family will be peaceful." She said it as if it were an unquestionable truth, and Emily, tired, lonely, accepted those words without resistance. The first shove happened on a very ordinary evening. Emily told me about it later. Ryan was irritated that dinner wasn't ready. He raised his hand and pushed her into the wall, not hard, no obvious marks. Ryan apologized immediately afterwards. He said he was under too much stress. That work had been overwhelming, that he didn't mean to do it. He hugged Emily and promised it would never happen again. Emily believed him. The next day, he bought gifts, took her out to eat, texted constantly, said he couldn't live without her. I saw Emily happier during those days. I thought everything was fine. But then the tension returned. Ryan became more controlling, more jealous. He started checking Emily's phone, asking who she was talking to. Why did she smile when texting? Emily began explaining every action. I made him upset. I shouldn't have argued. I know he's not a bad person. The first beating happened a few months later. Not a hard punch, just a slap during an argument. Emily fell to the floor. She didn't scream. She just sat there stunned. Ryan panicked. He knelt down, cried, apologized, said he wasn't that kind of person. Barbara was there that day. She didn't blame Ryan. She helped Emily ice the swelling, taught her how to cover the bruise. Don't let anyone see it. Family matters stay in the family. Emily began to believe it was her fault. She thought that if she spoke less, endured more, everything would be fine. She believed what was happening was just a difficult phase. The cycle repeated. Tension, violence, apologies, temporary calm. With each cycle, Emily's boundaries were gradually pushed back. When I asked if something was wrong, she said, "I'm fine, Mom." But her voice was no longer confident. Emily stopped looking at herself in the mirror. She stopped talking about the future. She lived day by day, trying not to upset Ryan. I realized this too late, because the most dangerous part of the cycle of abuse is not when someone is hit. It's when they begin to believe they deserve it. We returned to that dinner. Everything happened very quickly, yet it was all very clear. Emily stood up to pour more water for Ryan. Her hand trembled slightly. A drop of water fell onto the white tablecloth, very small, almost invisible. Ryan set his fork down. The sound of metal against the plate was sharp. "Don't you look?" he said, his voice calm enough to be chilling. Emily opened her mouth to apologize, but before she could finish the sentence, Ryan stood up. The first slap, the second, the third. No argument, no exchange of words, just violence. Emily fell off her chair and hit the floor. I saw her cheek redden instantly. She didn't cry. She lowered her head as if what had just happened were expected. And then I heard applause. Barbara. She clapped slowly, nodding. "You have to teach her like that for her to remember," she said. "Clumsy women need correction." No one objected. No one defended her. Ryan stood there, breathing heavily, as if he had just done something necessary. Barbara smiled in satisfaction, as if she had fulfilled her role. I looked at my daughter lying on the floor, and in that moment, I no longer saw the Emily of years past. I saw a woman who had grown accustomed to being hurt. For 30 seconds, I remained still. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood that if I reacted the wrong way, they would turn me into a troublemaker. They would say I was interfering in another family's business. I stood up very slowly. Ryan looked at me, slightly surprised. Perhaps he expected screaming, crying, a loss of control, but I did none of that. I took out my phone. My hand did not shake. I called the police. I clearly stated the address. I clearly stated that there was domestic violence, that there were witnesses. I turned on the recorder and placed the phone on the table. I looked straight at Ryan. "What you just did, say it again." Ryan went pale. Barbara stopped smiling. "This is a family matter," she said, her voice no longer as confident as before. "I am witnessing a crime," I replied, "and I will not stay silent." I stepped forward and helped Emily up. She whispered, "Mom." "From now on, I speak," I said. Ryan stepped forward. I raised my hand. "If you touch me, you will make everything worse for yourself." The sound of police sirens rose from the street. In that moment, I knew this dinner would be the last time they thought they could do this without consequences. Sometimes, one timely action is enough to save an entire life. The police arrived very quickly. Ryan was handcuffed on the spot. Barbara kept insisting that it was just a family misunderstanding. Emily was taken for a medical examination. I went with her to the hospital and sat by her bed all night. I thought the most challenging part was over. I was wrong. The next morning, the phone started ringing. First came acquaintances. They asked how we were doing, but their voices were cautious. Then Emily's co-workers. Some suggested that she should take some time off. Then the local press. They didn't ask whether Emily had been beaten. They asked whether my family was blowing the incident out of proportion. Ryan's lawyer appeared very early. He was polite and confident. He emphasized that Ryan was a model husband, had a stable job, and had no prior criminal record. He said Emily was emotionally unstable because of her father's death. Barbara went even further. She called relatives, mutual friends, even people I had once respected. She told a different story, that Emily was hot-tempered, that I interfered too much, that Ryan had only lost control for a moment. Those words spread quickly. Emily read a few comments online. She turned off her phone immediately. I saw her withdraw, just like in the early days when the abuse had first begun. "Maybe I should say I was mistaken," Emily asked me one evening. "I can't take this anymore." That sentence hurt me more than any blow. Ryan was detained, but his family filed for bail. Their lawyers were very skilled. They presented an image of a family torn apart by a misunderstanding. They emphasized that Emily did not have severe injuries. They asked why she hadn't reported it earlier. Those questions were raised in court, but they were also repeated in everyday life. Emily began to doubt herself. She couldn't sleep. She ate very little. Every time she heard a door, she startled. Sometimes she said, "Maybe I made him angry." I realized then that violence doesn't end when the abuser is handcuffed. It continues to live in the victim's mind through unanswered questions. I suffered losses as well. Some clients withdrew their cases. A few colleagues kept their distance. No one said it outright, but I understood. Not everyone wants to stand beside an abused woman when the other side has power and money. There were nights when I sat alone in the kitchen, wondering whether I was pushing Emily into a battle too big for her. Emily was visibly exhausted. One morning she said to me, "Maybe I should go back and talk to him, just to make everything quiet again." I looked at my daughter and understood that this was the most dangerous moment of all. Not when the violence happened, but when the victim wanted to return because she was too tired to keep resisting. I took Emily's hand. "You don't owe them your silence," I said. "You only owe yourself safety." Emily didn't answer, but for the first time in days, she didn't pull her hand away. Their counterattack hadn't stopped, but I knew that if we could endure this phase, the truth could not be buried forever. The truth about Barbara didn't come from a significant investigation. It came from small, scattered pieces that I had never put together before. One afternoon, I received a call from a woman who introduced herself as Linda, a distant relative on Ryan's side. Her voice was hesitant, as if she had thought about calling for a long time. "I don't know if you'll believe me," Linda said, "but you need to know that Ryan's mother is not the person she appears to be." We met at a small cafe. Linda spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. She told me that Barbara's former husband had died many years ago, an accident according to the records. But within the family, no one truly believed it was just an accident. "He had been beaten," Linda said, "more than once." Barbara controlled her husband the same way she controlled Ryan, cutting off relationships, undermining his self-worth. When he resisted, she told him it was his fault, that he was weak. No one stood up for him. Linda said that Ryan grew up in a home where silence was a survival skill. He learned how to please his mother, how to agree, how to see violence as usual. I remembered Barbara's words. "Men having tempers is normal. Women have to endure." Those weren't suggestions. They were beliefs. Barbara didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She believed she was maintaining order, preserving power, holding the family together in the only way she understood. I began to reflect on everything she had done over the years, the way she clapped when Ryan hit Emily, the way she taught Emily how to hide bruises, the way she turned violence into a family matter. Barbara didn't just tolerate violence, she cultivated it. Some evidence later emerged during the legal process, not enough to charge Barbara over her former husband's death, but enough to paint a clear picture of who she was. An older woman, intelligent, who understood how to use the role of mother as a tool of control. She knew society tends to trust older people. She knew a mother's words are more easily forgiven than a younger person's actions. Emily listened in silence to all of this. After meeting Linda, she said to me, "I kept thinking that if I tried harder, things would be different." I shook my head. "It wasn't your fault." This truth didn't bring Emily immediate relief, but it freed her from a dangerous belief that she could fix Ryan through her own sacrifice. Ryan didn't become this way by accident, but that doesn't make him an innocent victim. It shows that violence can be passed from one generation to the next if no one stops it. I told Emily something I had never said so directly before. Respecting elders does not mean accepting everything they do. Respect has to go hand in hand with morality. Emily nodded. For the first time in a long while, I saw clarity in her eyes instead of confusion. Painful clarity, but necessary. Barbara had used age and authority to hide her cruelty, but the truth, once spoken, is no longer easy to conceal. And that was when the balance began to shift. Emily decided to meet Ryan after nearly 3 months of his detention. It was not an impulsive decision. She thought about it for a long time. I neither pressured her nor tried to stop her. I knew there were things only she could say herself, and if they remained unsaid, they would stay with her for a very long time. The prison was located on the outskirts of the city. The visiting room was cold, brightly lit, with nothing to distract the eye. Ryan was brought in first. He was thinner, but his eyes were still familiar. As soon as he saw Emily, he stood up abruptly. "I miss you," he said immediately. "I've thought about a lot of things." Emily sat down across from him. Her back was straight. Her hands rested neatly on the table. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. "I'm here to say this once," Emily said, "not to argue." Ryan began explaining about pressure, about his childhood, about his mother. He said he had never been taught how to love appropriately, that he was only repeating what he knew. Emily listened to everything. She didn't interrupt. When Ryan stopped, she spoke very slowly. "I believe you've been through a lot of pain, but that doesn't give you the right to hurt me." Ryan lowered his head. "I'll change." Emily shook her head. "Maybe, but not with me." That sentence made Ryan look up, his eyes filled with panic. "I can't wait for you to learn how to be human through my pain," Emily continued. "I don't hate you, but I won't come back." Ryan reached out his hand, then stopped halfway. "You're my family." Emily looked straight at him. Family is not a place where people live in fear. There was no anger, no accusations, only resolve. The meeting ended quickly. When she stepped outside, Emily took a long breath. She stood still for a few seconds, then turned to me. "I thought it would be harder," she said, "but I feel lighter." I didn't say anything. I just held her hand. On the way home, Emily told me that for the first time in many years, she no longer felt the need to explain or apologize for her existence. She no longer believed that if she tried just a little harder, things would be different. She understood that not every relationship needs to be saved, and that leaving is not a failure, it's a necessary step. A few days later, Emily filed for divorce. Ryan called from detention, sent messages, wrote letters. Emily didn't respond, not out of hatred, but because she had already said everything that needed to be said. That night, Emily slept deeply. For the first time, I saw her sleep without jolting awake in the middle of the night. The meeting in prison did not repair the past, but it gave Emily back the right to speak, to choose, and to move forward. And that was the first step toward freedom. The trial took place nearly 6 months after the incident. That period was anything but calm. Emily learned to live one day at a time. Some days were manageable, others were exhausting. She attended therapy regularly. There were days she came home completely silent. I didn't push. I understood that healing does not follow a straight line. In the courtroom, Ryan looked very different from the day he was arrested. He was neatly dressed and spoke in a soft voice. His lawyers presented their case in a precise and methodical manner. They emphasized that Ryan had no prior criminal record. He was enrolled in an anger management program, that he was the product of an unhealthy childhood. Emily sat beside me, her back straight. She did not look at Ryan. When it was her turn, Emily stood up. No theatrics, no dramatics. "He hit me," she said, "more than once, and I was afraid in my own home." That was all. No tears, no further details. The court found Ryan guilty of domestic violence. He received a relatively light sentence, along with a permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with Emily and a mandatory long-term treatment program. I did not feel the relief I had expected. It was not a verdict that invited applause. It did not erase the years Emily lived in fear. It did not bring a sense of victory. Barbara also appeared in court, but in a different capacity. She was reprimanded and placed under monitoring. No prison sentence, no punishment that would satisfy outsiders. She left the courtroom with a calm expression. Emily watched her, then turned to me. "So, is it over now, Mom?" I thought for a long time before answering. "Legally, almost. But for you, not yet. Justice on paper has limits. It can only address what can be proven. It cannot measure fear. It cannot measure the losses inside the victim." Emily understood that. She didn't expect a perfect ending. She needed only one thing, for the truth to be acknowledged. And that had happened. After the trial, life did not return to normal immediately. Emily was still startled by loud voices, still avoided crowded places. Sometimes she wondered if she had overreacted, but then she remembered what she had lived through, and she no longer doubted herself. I learned something too, that justice does not always bring satisfaction, but it can create boundaries, and those boundaries are enough for a victim to begin rebuilding a life. Emily didn't need a perfect sentence. She needed a stopping point. And at last, that stopping point existed. After the trial, Emily's life did not change overnight, but it began to slow down. She moved to live closer to me, a small apartment full of light, nothing special but quiet. In the mornings, Emily brewed coffee, opened the windows, and let the air into the room. Very ordinary things, but things she had rarely felt safe enough to enjoy before. Emily continued therapy. There were days she came home exhausted. Some days she sat quietly for hours. I didn't ask much. I learned how to be present without pushing. Gradually, Emily began doing small things for herself. She took morning walks, reconnected with an old friend, accepted a short-term project, not to prove anything, but to remember what it felt like to choose. Some wounds do not disappear. Emily still startled when a door slammed. She still needed time to trust, but she no longer doubted that she had the right to live a peaceful life. Our family changed as well. We no longer had the large family dinners we once did, but when we sat together, no one had to be cautious. No one had to stay silent to keep the peace. I thought a great deal about David during this time. He once told Emily, "Family is a place where you get to be yourself, even when you are vulnerable." I realized that even though he was gone, those values still lived on, if we continued to protect them. Respecting elders does not mean obeying everything they say. Respect means carrying forward what is right and stopping what is wrong, no matter who says it. Emily understood that, and so did I. A few months later, Emily told me she wanted to tell her story, not in the press, not in court, just to tell it, so that if someone else was living in fear, they would know they were not alone. I helped her write everything down, slowly, honestly, without embellishment, and I realized that telling this story not only helped Emily, it also helped me confront my own silence, the times I chose to believe that everything would be fine instead of asking one more question. Healing does not mean forgetting. Healing means continuing to live without letting the past control the present. Emily is still on that path. So am I. If you have listened to this story this far, you may be thinking about a loved one, a family, or yourself. If stories like this matter to you, stay with this channel. Every time we listen and share, it means one more person knows they have the right to be safe, to be respected, and to live in accordance with the actual values of family.